we're just starting our seminar with the help of Elene Jibladze, which is an associate professor in the School of Business, Technology and Education in the Ilia State University of Georgia. We are a group of MSc students, MSc graduates, Master of Higher Education Policy, some PhD candidates, professor and member and teaching members of the master. Let me tell you some words about Elene. Elene is an education policy expert with over 10 years of experience in the education system reform in transition countries. She holds a professional expertise in the areas of quality assurance in higher education. Her research interests cover educational quality, university autonomy, and the concept of engaged university. Prior to joining Ilia State University, Elene was a director of the Georgian National Centre for Educational Quality Enhancement, responsible for the external quality assurance at higher, vocational, and general educational level. She also represented Georgia at the Bologna follow-up group, and she has more than 10 years of professional experience with non-governmental organizations and government agencies in the field of education, of higher education, and especially related to the field of quality assurance. So, Elene, the floor is yours, and thank you one more time for accepting to do this seminar for us.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for this invitation, Angelos. I'm really, really happy that our meeting at Thessaloniki has resulted into this online meeting, and I'm hoping that this is just the start of our cooperation. And thank you for such a turnout. There are lots of interested people, so I'm really happy to see that all the colleagues have gathered so that we can share some experiences, because I am a believer that there are certain processes that we do share across the countries, but then the contexts do matter. And today what I want to talk about is the context of the country in transition, in the democratic transition, and how these processes of building democratic institutions in the country spill over into higher education institutions, into higher education system, and how it affects the institutional transformation. So this is what I would like to talk about today. And this would be more of a me kind of wanting to have more of a informal storytelling conversation between the colleagues, so that we could also hoping it would lead to a very rich discussion. So with this small introduction, let me just share my PowerPoint presentation, which will be just a little bit of, give us just a little bit of a guidance towards the story that I want to share with you. And right, as the title shows, so this is, again, in political science, Georgia, as many post-Soviet countries, are classified, termed as the country in transition. And one of the main characteristics of our countries is that we do transition from the Soviet authoritarian and centralized regime towards the democracy, but we never get there. So we're kind of, this transition lingers. So And this becomes the state of being. So what does that mean for higher education? And how do we kind of learn how to function in this transitional limbo? This is something that I would like us to talk about today. And how did we get to Bologna, right? So just a little bit what the story is about. For those who might not know, just to set a little bit of like the story boundaries, Georgia is a post-Soviet state. We claimed independence from the USSR, from the Soviet Union in 1991, immediately destabilizing the political system and political situation. We suffered through one civil war and one proxy war with Russia, which led us to a frozen conflict with our autonomous Republic Abkhazia. After that, we moved to this stagnation and the post-Soviet demise, and the state sank into the corruption, and this was the state of higher education as well. This is where state funding was no longer available, so the university started to improvise for the funding. So this is where we see the private sector programs being introduced into the state universities, after which the privatization of the state property and state universities, so to speak, also followed. So this was happening until 2003, when within the line of post-Soviet peaceful revolutions, we also followed the crew. And in 2003, we had the peaceful Rose Revolution, which marked the move from the corrupted post-Soviet state in inertia into the process of democratization, which we also meant to be the Europeanization or Westernization of the state. This was politically, this was marked by our then Prime Minister's speech at the United Nations, where he said, "I am Georgian, therefore I am European." So this hallmarks the whole political struggle as well as the agenda. And so it also marked the higher education reform agenda. Soon after this, we became part of the Bologna process, which was also, again, part of the Europeanization, which was a political statement, as well as the country's need to catch up with all of the time and the processes and the knowledge and the experiences that have been accumulated without participation of Georgia as a post-Soviet state. So this was a big catch-up game for Georgia 2003 onwards. So we have accelerated our reforms. It was called sweeping reforms, transformative reforms, including higher education system. We signed Bologna in 2005, and already in 2007, by Bologna's scorecard report, it was named as a success story. And this gave a big boost to the higher education community that we were the forerunners, leaving other post-Soviet states behind who were also part of Bologna. Let me quickly say what was the...
Elene, sorry for the interruption. May I say some key words, key phrases in Greek? Just because I'm going to forget. Thank you very much. Είμαι σίγουρος ότι δεν το χρειαζόμαστε αυτό, αλλά έτσι, επειδή το είχαμε συμφωνήσει έτσι και επειδή συνήθως έτσι γίνεται, ουσιαστικά η Ελένη εδώ πέρα μας βάζει το ιστορικό πλαίσιο από το 1991 και μετά. Οι λέξεις κλειδιά είναι ότι από το 1991 και μετά ουσιαστικά η χώρα είναι μια χώρα σε μετάβαση. Από το post-USSR το 1991 και μετά κάνει τα πρώτα βήματα προσπάθεια εκδημοκρατισμού και ανεξαρτητοποίησης. Ταυτόχρονα έχουμε έναν σύντομο εμφύλιο πόλεμο. έχουμε εχθροπραξίες και με το νέο κράτος στην Ρωσία. Σε αυτή την αλλαγή μπαίνει σε μία, αν κατάλαβα καλά, και πολιτική κρίση, και αυτό φυσικά επηρεάζει και τη λειτουργία της ανώτατης εκπαίδευσης. Ξαφνικά η ανώτατη εκπαίδευση, που ήταν κρατικά χρηματοδοτούμενη αποκλειστικά, χάνει αυτή την χρηματοδότηση, οπότε αρχίζει να ψάχνει τρόπους για να αυξήσει το εισόδημά της, μέσα και από την ιδιωτική χρηματοδότηση, που σιγά σιγά πηγαίνουμε στα επόμενα βήματα της και κάποιων ιδιωτικοποιήσεων. Αν κατάλαβα καλά, η Ελένη είπε ότι το 2003 είναι ένα πρώτο turning point, in 2003, γιατί εκεί έχουμε μια μεγάλη προσπάθεια ευρωπαϊκοποίησης. Όχημα σε αυτή την προσπάθεια είναι και η πολιτική στην ανώτατη εκπαίδευση μέσα από το Bologna Process, στον οποίο το σύστημα μπαίνει το 2005, και μέχρι το 7 τα scorecards από τις εξελίξεις και τις βελτιώσεις σε όλα τα policy axes έχουν βελτιωθεί πάρα πολύ, τόσο που να θεωρείται και ένα παράδειγμα μεταξύ των πρώην κρατών του Ανατολικού Μπλοκ που μπήκαν στο Bologna Process. Elena just said the key ideas about what we have already said about the history and the context, which is very important for us to be able to understand some steps. And you may continue. Thank you very much, and sorry about the interruption.
No problem at all. So just to quickly say what were the reforms about. So all of the reforms that by 2005 Bologna process, or all of the processes, recommendations that the Bologna process had by then, Georgia, without any question, adopted those. They said, yes, we want it. So everything was happening all at once. So we set up and developed quality assurance system. So before that, we only had the state licensing. So quality assurance was not there. So the organization for the quality assurance, then called Accreditation Center, was set up. And also the mechanism of internal quality assurance, so internal and external quality assurance, those were developed. By then, I was involved in the group that was developing the whole system. Basically, it was being funded by the US at that point. This happened. Then also at the same time, the old Soviet system of education, which was a one-tier system consisting of 5 years, was 4 + 2, and then +3 for doctoral studies were introduced. Then it was followed, or it was together done with introducing the ECTS, so the credit system, so that our credentials were easily translated into in Europe. We also developed the National Qualifications Framework and wanted to self-certify, and this was all set up in accordance with the EQF, European Qualifications Framework. And then also the degree recognition and fostering degree recognition was part of it. This was all under the umbrella of Bologna reforms. And I have to say that all of this, or most of this, by the time when I joined the Quality Assurance Center, all of this, the whole mandate, Bologna mandate, had moved already to the Quality Assurance Center, and we were the one who were administering everything. Because the ministry had somehow lost the interest to do so. I will park this idea right there. And I will also kind of talk about the reforms that is under the Tier 2 here. So the whole system, the whole country was moving towards the neoliberal economic development phase, because this was meant to be the best for the country who wanted to develop in an accelerated time, or to accelerate in short time. So short governance, small governance, and neoliberal economic development was a signature for Georgia, and they spilled over into higher education as well. Higher education system governance was also hallmarked by the small governance, which is why the Ministry of Education became a small unit, and then it had its regulatory agencies, for instance, Quality Assurance Agency, the National Agency for Examinations, the Foundation for Research Development, so on and so forth. So it would have its own satellite organizations that were implementing the policy. And the Ministry of Education was supposed to be only the policy strategizer. They were going to put the strategy together, and then everybody else was going to implement it. Within this idea, the universities had to no longer depend on the ministry, neither financially or governance-wise. So they had to be able to self-govern, which is why the autonomy was paramount by then. And by 2005, new law, the university autonomy was put into the, was guaranteed by the Constitution. It was so highly prioritized, right? At the same time, the idea was that universities had to compete for the survival of the fittest, so to speak. And because the country didn't have enough funds for education, in higher education, so-called money follows student, i.e. student voucher-based financial model was introduced. And I can talk about this just a little bit more if you would be interested later on during the discussion. At the same time, during the Soviet times, the research and education were separate. So research was not happening at the universities, right? It was happening in the science centers or scientific research institutions, scientific institutions, so to speak. And these two were merged under the suggestion or inspiration that was taken from, in combination of the Bologna process and the World Bank, that were putting kind of the reform together for Georgia. I will stop there. If Angelos, you would like to translate it in few words.
Thank you very much, Elene. Ουσιαστικά θα πω λίγα πράγματα για το πρώτο κομμάτι που η Ελένη είπε. Μας παρουσίασε μια βεντάλια μεταρρυθμίσεων που γίνονται κάτω από την ομπρέλα του Bologna Process και πρακτικά είναι όλες οι κεντρικές πολιτικές action lines μέσα από το Bologna Process. Οι λέξεις κλειδιά που εγώ κράτησα είναι ότι όλα γίνανε με μεγάλη επιτάχυνση, παράλληλα, γρήγορα. Υπήρξε αμέσως μια προσπάθεια αλλαγής και στην διακυβέρνηση σε επίπεδο ανώτατων ιδρυμάτων αλλά και συστημικά, όπου φτιάχτηκαν πολλές δομές που δεν προϋπήρχαν και πολλοί, όπως είπε, satellite organizations για να αναλάβουν, να τρέξουν την εφαρμογή αυτών των αλλαγών και των μεταρρυθμίσεων. Και το ίδιο το Υπουργείο Παιδείας, ακριβώς επειδή έγινε αυτή η αλλαγή στην όλη δομή με όλους αυτούς τους νέους οργανισμούς, φάνηκε σε ένα πρώτο επίπεδο να κρατά την επιλογή της στρατηγικής των πολιτικών και του σχεδιασμού, αφήνοντας τους οργανισμούς να τρέξουν τις μεταρρυθμίσεις. Ταυτόχρονα αυτό φάνηκε να αυξάνει την αυτονομία στα πανεπιστήμια, η οποία ως έννοια μπήκε και στο ανώτερο υψηλό επίπεδο, δηλαδή στο Σύνταγμα της χώρας. Παράλληλα όμως, ακριβώς επειδή το σύστημα ήταν αρκετά ακριβώς στη λειτουργία του, καταλαβαίνετε ότι λέω όπως εγώ τα αντιλαμβάνομαι, την παρουσίαση της Ελέν, μπορούμε να το συζητήσουμε μετά, αυξάνεται και η μεταξύ τους ανταγωνιστική σχέση για την έβρεση extra funding. Εκεί μπαίνει και το student voucher και μπαίνουν και κάποιες δομές που συνδυάζουν την έρευνα με τη χρηματοδότηση και την επιπλέον χρηματοδότηση των πανεπιστημίων και έτσι φαίνεται να αλλάζει ένα τοπίο που παράλληλα με την αυτονομία ως έννοια μπαίνει πολύ και μια ανταγωνιστική σχέση μεταξύ των πανεπιστημίων στη Τζόρτζια. Ελέν, I hope I didn't say too much.
I trust you.
Yes, thank you.
Just a little bit of figures. So Georgia is a small country with the population of 3.7 million. And for this population, we have 63 higher education institutions, which is a high number, out of which 14 are state universities, meaning that those have all three levels of education, providing 3 levels of education, including doctoral studies. Out of these 63, we have 4 teaching universities as well, which have only 2 bachelor's and master's degrees. The rest of it is private sector. Now, while this, enrollment-wise, 63 universities absorb about 180,000 students, which is not too much still. With the annual enrollment of about 47,000. 47,000 students are enrolled annually, but 14 universities absorb 2/3 of the whole student population. So out of the 63, only state universities absorb the most. So private universities and institutions are very small and they absorb small amount of students, 1/3 amount of students, okay? Out of the 2/3 that goes on, that falls on the state universities, the main population, student population, is absorbed by 3 major universities that are situated in the capital. So there is a high migration towards the capital of the younger generation, okay? As for the funding, education is not prioritized in the country. So, whole education sector, including general education, which is schools, preschool, vocational education, and the rest of it, including higher education, make up 3.6% of our GDP. Out of which, and you can see here on this small pie, only 7.5% goes on higher education. And the major chunk goes to general education. Half of the funding goes into general education. The research makes up only 0.25% of the GDP. And I will stop right there if you want. So, which means that the research and development is not happening in the country, which claims that it has to be developing very fast. It doesn't really put too much of an emphasis or does not understand that the emphasis needs to be put into the research.
Η Ελένη μας είπε μερικά πολύ εντυπωσιακά πράγματα. Δεν θα επαναλάβω τους αριθμούς. Σε ένα κράτος με λιγότερο από 4 εκατομμύρια πληθυσμό υπάρχουν 63 ιδρύματα ανώτατης εκπαίδευσης. Όμως από την ανάλυση της μετά κατάλαβαμε ότι 14 από αυτά είναι τα δημόσια, εκ των οποίων 3 είναι τα μεγάλα, που έχουν το μεγαλύτερο ποσοστό από τα 2/3 των φοιτητών που μπαίνουν συνολικά στην ανώτατη εκπαίδευση. Άρα υπάρχουν πάρα πολλά ιδιωτικά μικρά, με λίγους φοιτητές, και εάν πάμε στο συστημικό επίπεδο της χρηματοδότησης, έχουμε 3,6 του GDP από να είναι στην εκπαίδευση, αλλά μόνο το 7,5% από αυτό στο higher education sector, και το R&D, η ανάπτυξη και η έρευνα δεν είναι στις βασικές προτεραιότητες, καθώς φαίνεται από τη χρηματοδότηση ότι είναι πάρα πολύ χαμηλή. Ελένη.
So just this is like giving you an understanding of how much of the reform has been done also in a really short time, because the first wave of the reforms was crammed within 2005 and 2008. And then not too much of the resources have been allocated to it, because you see that the funding still, it has only incrementally increased. So within this situation, and I'm not the one who usually says that because we do not have funding, that's why the system is not progressing or developing. I'm suggesting a different path of the argument here. Institutional transformation, the sweeping reforms, as it was politically labeled, did not lead to a comprehensive improvement of the higher education climate. And the paradox of it was very much visible by 2010 already. And even the policymakers who were really have international policy internationally, they started to kind of question what was happening in Georgia and why was this happening. Well, this would be a very interesting to kind of talk about it, why this was happening. I will just provide a small conceptual framework at the end of our talk, but right now I wanted just to talk about what does this manifest in when we are stuck into this fragile state of suspended development, right? So right now our higher education system remains in to speak suspended development, because over the course of the years we kind of repeat one and the same reform. We still need to work on the quality assurance. The qualifications framework is still not quite developed. We still have the problems with the internal quality assurance. We do have a high problem in the university autonomy, and so on and so forth, right? So the argument here is that the system in the suspended development is suffering from, it never matures. So the institutions remain fragile, and the system itself, the processes are very volatile. Now, the volatility of the processes can be manifested in many different ways, but today I would like to talk about only two. One is the struggle with the institutional autonomy. And when I talk about institutions here, I mean all of the, in general, organizations that are involved in the policymaking in higher education system, including universities, but not just universities, right? And first would be the struggle with the institutional autonomy, and second would be the struggle of the professionalization. So the lack of competent people who are involved in policymaking. So these are the two claims that I will be making in the next 15 minutes.
Thank you, Len. Ουσιαστικά εδώ μας προετοιμάζει η Ελένη για το πού θα εστιάσει την συζήτησή της. Αυτό που φάνηκε μετά από κάποια χρόνια, 10 χρόνια και προσπάθειας μεταρρυθμίσεων, είναι ότι τελικά αυτές δεν πήγαν πολύ καλά, δεν βελτίωσαν σε συστημικό επίπεδο τη λειτουργία της ανώτατης εκπαίδευσης, και παρόλο που πολύ νωρίς ξεκίνησαν να αναπτύσσονται κάποιοι άξονες πολιτικής που και στο μεταπτυχιακό μας τους έχουμε κουβεντιάσει πάρα πολύ μέσα στο πλαίσιο της Bologna Process, φάνηκε να παραμένουν τα προβλήματα που υπήρχαν και στα πρώτα χρόνια. Φάνηκε να υπάρχει μια δυσκολία στο να αναπτυχθεί η ουσιαστική αυτονομία και φάνηκε να μην λειτουργούν οι οργανισμοί, και όταν λέμε institutions, οργανισμοί και αυτοί που ήταν υπεύθυνοι για να τρέξουν τις μεταρρυθμίσεις με έναν αποδοτικό τρόπο. Άρα η εστίαση της συνέχειας από την presentation της Ελένη θα έχει να κάνει με αυτή τη συζήτηση γύρω από το Organization Autonomy, ταυτόχρονα μαζί με μία συζήτηση για την έλλειψη ειδικών που ασχολούνται, policy makers δηλαδή, που ασχολούνται με την εφαρμογή των πολιτικών αυτών. And then you may continue. Thank you very much.
So right now, giving all this kind of bigger pictures, parameters, I would like to zoom into the quality assurance system. As it was already mentioned, for a few years, I was heading the quality assurance agency back in Georgia, not back, but here in Georgia. And then I was also researching it for a few still. So just a little bit of what was happening, what's happened from 2004 onwards. The main aim was to downsize the number of institutions, as I mentioned, at the time of the change of the government in 2003, there were no reliable data on what was happening in higher education. So corruption did breed this irresponsibility about, or staying vague about the numbers, so that the accountability system was no longer there. So we couldn't tell what were the enrollment numbers. We couldn't tell what was the funding. We couldn't tell what was the number of the academic personnel. So this was the time when the mechanism of external quality assurance came about as a mechanism to cleanse the system. So in the first 2 to 3 cycles of the institutional accreditation from 2004 till 2006, the number of institutions, higher education institutions, which were of dubious quality, and some of them were actually just selling the diplomas, those were over 200 in the country. And those were downsized from 50, and then it stopped at 60. So since then, we have had the same kind of amount of the institutions, which amounts to 60. This was a very controversial and very emotionally tense situation because these corrupted businessmen were actually targeting those who were involved in the reform of the system. So you will hear lots of tales of how they were chased after to their houses or called and so on and so forth. So this is the time of very rough transition, so to speak. 2008 onwards, the system stabilizes. This type of situation is not there anymore. However, because in 2004, 2006, accreditation was used as a punitive mechanism, it kind of developed this reputation that they were no good for the universities, that they were after the universities. And Quality Assurance Center never recovered from this reputation, to be honest. At the beginning, there were true signs for it, and even the mechanism, the standards for institutional or program accreditation were very prescriptive and input-based. So therefore, this reputation was very just. But even when, from 2008 till 2016, when the Quality Assurance Agency tried to recover from this, and they had 2 large-scale waves of the reforms of quality assurance mechanisms in itself, and they moved from the input to the output-based standards, they never recovered, and the system still on the paper is very much development-oriented. However, it remains to be prescriptive in the way of implementation. It does not allow, it allows very limited flexibility for the interpretation, which breeds the homogeneity at the university level, and there is not too much of a difference between the programs from one university to the other. Just to mention the internationalization of the process itself, and what happened at the same time was that 2017 onwards, Quality Assurance Centre became the member of ENCA, the European Network for Quality Assurance, and also then afterwards became the member of ECAR, which is the registrar, and also became the member of the World Forum for the Medical Education, which helps universities to get international students. 2024 onwards, after the political crisis, the autonomy of the Quality Assurance Center as an institution has shrunk significantly, which was then communicated to ENCA and ECAR, which led to the suspension of the membership of the Quality Assurance Center in the Quality Assurance Register. I will stop right here.
Thank you, Elene. Thank you, Elene. Η Ελένη, επειδή είναι expert στο Quality Assurance Policy, μας είπε, χώρισε την περίοδο από το 4 και μετά πρακτικά σε 4 περιόδους. Την 4η θα τη δούμε, φαντάζομαι, στη συνέχεια. Στην πρώτη περίοδο ουσιαστικά μας περιέγραψε ότι με οδηγό την αρχή διασφάλισης ποιότητας και επιστοποίησης έγινε μια προσπάθεια ελέγχου του συστήματος της ανώτατης εκπαίδευσης, γιατί υπήρχε αρκετή διαφθορά, υπήρχαν ιδιωτικά ιδρύματα που απλώς δίνανε, όπως είπε η Ελένη, διπλώματα, και έγινε μια προσπάθεια καταρχήν να καταγραφεί, να αποτυπωθούν τα στοιχεία, και έγινε μια μεγάλη μείωση, όχι ως αποτέλεσμα, τη μεγάλη μείωση στον αριθμό, από πάνω από 200 σε 60. Άρα, σε αυτή την περίοδο, η αρχή της διασφάλισης ποιότητας και της επιστοποίησης ήταν ουσιαστικά ένας μηχανισμός ελέγχου, παραγωγής δεδομένων για έλεγχο διαφθοράς και πρακτικά ένας τιμωρητικός μηχανισμός. Η δεύτερη περίοδος από το 8 στο 16 ουσιαστικά προσπαθεί να ακολουθήσει καλύτερα τον ευρωπαϊκό τρόπο και τα συστήματα, να εξειδικεύσει ανθρώπους για να μπορέσουν να τρέξουν τις διαδικασίες εξωτερικής αξιολόγησης και accreditation, όμως και λόγω αυτής της πολύ ισχυρής πρώτης περίοδου συνεχίζει στην κουλτούρα των πανεπιστημίων να μένει ως ένας τιμωρητικός οργανισμός που δεν δρά υποστηρικτικά στα πανεπιστήμια, αλλά απέναντί τους. Ευρωπαϊκοποιείται το σύστημα μέσα στη διαδικασία της Bologna και γίνεται μέλος η NCEQE και η EQR. Ταυτόχρονα όμως έρχεται αυτή η τελευταία περίοδος που φαντάζομαι θα ακούσουμε και στη συνέχεια, από το 2024 και μετά, με πολλά βήματα πίσω ως προς την αυτονομία και στον τρόπο λειτουργίας και του Οργανισμού για τη Διασφάλιση Ποιότητας, και αυτή τη στιγμή είναι σε suspension η ιδιότητά του στην NCEQE και η EQR. Helen, you may continue.
Thanks. Just a little bit of more concrete examples of what do I mean by struggling with the institutional autonomy, or struggle for the institutional autonomy within the quality assurance system. As I mentioned, like the main kind of paradox or something that we don't wish to happen is that by the law or formally, the autonomy is somehow guaranteed, or this was the aim from the very beginning when devising or revising the system. But then it looks like, and it seems like that in Georgia, the informal practices prevail, although formal rules are in place for the system to function in a straightforward manner. So, for instance, as a guarantee of independence and impartiality of the Quality Assurance Center, from the Ministry of Education, there was a discussion, and in 2010, they changed the regulation according to which the director of the quality assurance was being appointed by the minister. And what they did was to neutralize this kind of chain of command. By now, according to the law, the Quality Assurance Center, although it's the candidacy of the head of the Quality Assurance Center is suggested by the minister to the prime minister, but it's the prime minister who actually appoints him or her. Having said that, it does have the problem within itself, because it still shows that if the system is centralized, it doesn't really matter whether it's the minister or the prime minister there, right? But what we do see in practice, what happens was that it's not that the Ministry of Education is not supposed to be involved, but for years, and for the past 2 years, the Deputy Minister of Education was simultaneously head of the center, right? And that has happened in within the interim of 2008 and 2010, and then after 2014 for some time. So this happens whenever the political situation brings forward the need for it, or whenever there is an attention towards the autonomy is relaxed, so to speak. Also, you know that since April 2024, country kind of sank into this growing political crisis, which is carried on now today marks the 53rd day of the constant civil demonstrations in Georgia, particularly in Tbilisi. So within this situation, Ministry of Education pressured the Quality Assurance Agency to release the statement condemning these protests. And because, as I mentioned already before, the informal practices prevail formal practices, and the country is very small, of course, this was very easily circulated within the informal grapevine of the higher education community, right? The second is that the accreditation and authorization councils, which are taking the decision upon the accreditation, and authorization is the same thing as the institutional accreditation, basically. They are also supposed to be approved by the prime minister, but this doesn't really matter. As long as the political chain or the governmental interests prevail. And again, during the protests, Ilia State University was very vocal, which is why when the time came for the institutional accreditation decision of Ilia State University, we were demoted without a good reason, because the evaluation report was excellent. However, we were demoted and granted the conditional accreditation instead. And again, because of the informal practices, we learned that this was a pressure coming from the ministry, that we needed to be somehow put in place, so that because we are showing the discontent towards the establishment.
Okay, thank you. Εδώ η Ελένη μας περιγράφει με πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα βήματα την παρούσα κατάσταση, όπου ενώ υπάρχει μια προσπάθεια να παραχθούν κανονισμοί ώστε να αυξηθεί η ανεξαρτησία της Ανώτατης Αρχής για Διασφάλιση Ποιότητα και Πιστοποίηση στην Τζόρτζια, πρακτικά συμβαίνει ακριβώς το αντίθετο. Πάω κατευθείαν σε αυτά που μου κάνανε εντύπωση, είναι ότι για τα τελευταία 2 χρόνια ο υφυπουργός από το Υπουργείο Παιδείας, αν κατάλαβα καλά, είναι και ουσιαστικά ο head του Quality Assurance. Πολύ συχνά κυβερνητικά από το Υπουργείο Παιδείας πιέζεται η ανεξάρτητη αρχή να παίρνει θέση πάνω στις έντονες πολιτικές διαδικασίες που υπάρχουν από τον Απρίλιο του 2024 και μετά. Έχασα το πόσες μέρες συνεχόμενες γινόταν οι διαδηλώσεις. Παρ' όλα αυτά πιέστηκε η αρχή να βγάλει μια ανακοίνωση
53, κύριε Καβασακάρη.
53, ευχαριστώ. Για το πόσο καταδικάζει αυτές τις διαδηλώσεις και ταυτόχρονα το ίδιο το Συμβούλιο που ορίζεται από τον Πρωθυπουργό πιέζεται για τις τελικές αποφάσεις. Ένα παράδειγμα είναι το Ilia State University, που είναι ένα μεγάλο πανεπιστήμιο και με ιστορία, όπου ακριβώς επειδή αναδεικνύει κάποιες αδυναμίες σε συστημικό επίπεδο και αυτής της διαδικασίας, παρόλο που η έκθεση αξιολόγησης του ήταν πολύ καλή, μπήκε σε μια διαδικασία monitoring. Ilia, you may continue. Thank you. Elene, sorry.
Sure, no
I
problem.
just said about the Ilia State University, which although it had a very an unconditional accreditation
Report. That's right.
report, due to the analysis that as a university does about the reforms, as if I understand it correctly.
Because we are opposing, because the
Yes,
students
yes,
and the
yes,
academic
yes.
personnel opposes the political situation, we were somehow, they tried to silence us or scare us with this.
Yeah.
We appeal the decision now and the process is ongoing.
And now you are under the process of monitoring.
Officially, it says that this is the accreditation for 6 years, but in a year, they should come to monitor us. But
Just
we don't.
in 1 year, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they don't have the ground for it. Just to jump to the institutional autonomy at the university level, because these are kind of the different pieces of one puzzle, right? While Quality Assurance Center struggles with the autonomy itself, then the institutions struggle with the autonomy. Again, as I mentioned, the university autonomy is ensured by the law. The university autonomy, so for instance, by the law, the universities are free to elect the rector and the head of the administration. However, only Ilia State University, out of the 14 state universities that we have, only Ilia State University has a rector that is elected from within. All other universities, again, state universities, have directors who have been informally suggested by the ruling party. So therefore, again, the loyalty prevails and not the formal rules which make the institutional setup healthy. Do you want me to move or would you translate now? Or I can move to the next one. It's a shorter.
You may move. I'm just going to say 2 words in Greek. Ουσιαστικά το παράδειγμα που μας έδωσε η Ελένη είναι χαρακτηριστικό, ενώ μέσα και σε επίπεδο συντάγματος υπάρχει αυτονομία. Μόνο ένα πανεπιστήμιο, το Ilia State University, έχει κατορθώσει αυτή την περίοδο να έχει εκλέξει εσωτερικά τον πρίτανη που θέλει. Και όλα τα υπόλοιπα State Universities έχουν δεχθεί τις πιέσεις σε πολιτικό επίπεδο και έχουν βάλει τους αρεστούς προς το Υπουργείο Πριτάνης. Έχουν ορίσει. Okay, Elena, you may continue. Thank you very much.
again, at the same time, because the situation is usually very fragile and volatile because of this, the struggle for the institutional autonomy and the agency of the institutions is there. And I'm going to give just a little bit of more examples of that has been very vivid in 2024. So university autonomy is guaranteed by the Constitution, as I have mentioned, but political interference is constant. In June 2024, after the protests, the first wave of the protests that we had, the Prime Minister, in his public statement, Facebook statement of his, said that the Ilia State University is an opposition university, which negates the whole idea of a free university and university autonomy, right? And also attacked Tbilisi State University, which is called Alma Mater. It is the first university in the country, and said that some of the professors at the Tbilisi State University also are biased and have a wrong political affiliation, and they need to be dismissed. Second, for instance, and if we're not to talk in a very kind of broad sense about the autonomy, there is a rectors' conference that is a body that functions with or next to the Ministry of Education, and this is supposed to be, this is the platform for all of the rectors, state and private universities, institutions in the country, to use this as a platform to broker the university agenda, but they don't do it. So there is no kind of the universities coming together towards one goal. Instead, it's the area where each individual university is trying to push their own interest forward. Given this situation, in 2024, Ministry of Education and Science and Youth, again, pressured the Rectors' Conference, just like the Quality Assurance Center, that they released the statement that said, again, that universities are not a political, they should not be part of the political debate. Therefore, the students and the academic personnel should not be joining the protests, and that they are against the protests.
Elena, I think you may move because the paradigms that you have said are very clear to us.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
And I think this is more of an extensive overview of what I mean by the lack of or struggle of the institutional autonomy. Again, just to put it together, it's that by the law or formally, we do have a possibility to do so and to grant all the institutions autonomy. However, it is not happening because of the system's volatility and the institutional fragility. This is very much kind of what adds to it is the lack of educators in the higher education system, which kind of brings this whole situation together. Because in higher education system is not very much professionalized. I don't know how it is in Greece, but in Georgia, it is very much believed that since all of us have gone to school, and most of us have gone to the university, then we know what needs to be done in the higher education system. So they are by default, because they've gone through the education system, then they are professionals in the education system, and they have an understanding of what needs to be changed. Therefore, the higher education professional, the qualification of it is not very much registered into the system as something that is needed, that there is a different strand of knowledge that system needs for its management and development. Therefore, we have never had, and only in first 2 years after 2004, we had people who were actually trained in education, who were part of the decision-making processes in the system. But once they left, not too many have re-entered the system. In 2008, there was an exodus of the education professionals from the Ministry of Education and other satellite agencies. And since then, it has not been inhabited by them. They were absorbed by the universities more. So what the situation that we have right now is that higher education system is governed by those who do not understand higher education, but have a conviction that they do understand it. So this is mainly lawyers, because the bureaucracy is harvested by lawyers usually. Ministry of Education is saturated by lawyers, and these are lawyers by training, but they are not trained in education law. Right? Quality Assurance Center is right now headed by a lawyer. And the university rectors, and this is more that this is the saturation by lawyers. But the second that we have is that the competence doesn't really matter if you are loyal to the party. So therefore, then again, the development is damaged because we have those at the decision-making, having a decision-making power who do not have an understanding, but also do not have an interest of developing the educational systems or universities. As I've mentioned already, the rectors are political appointees, and therefore this kind of trumps the development, right? And just the caveat, so over the course of these days, and the volatility of it is that, for instance, when I was putting together this presentation, I did not have this last slide, but today I had to add this. This is so volatile, the situation here, because today the Prime Minister announced a new reform in Georgia, which is very much politically motivated, which is very much linked to his public statements that I've already mentioned before. And he had said that the higher education needs a huge reform because it needs to, and the discourse is very isolationist. So they say that we are supposed to be creating the higher education system that will not need our students to go abroad and get education. And right now, they've announced that the reform committee will be put together at the ministerial level, which will be headed by the minister and the advisor of the Prime Minister in Education. Minister of Education is a former prosecutor. And the Prime Minister's advisor in education is a former Minister of Defense, and before that he was working at the Ministry of Interior Affairs. So again, we do see the proliferation of the the competence of an educator per se. They are not being taken seriously. So the professionalism is not something that is valued. And this is just probably a lengthy discussion of what I wanted to say. And just to close, all of this, without putting too much emotion into it, the public policy and political science scholars do mention that it can be explained very well by the sociological new institutionalism and historical new institutionalism very much. The World Society theory says that the countries like Georgia, who are playing and very much involved in this catch-up game, they will always compromise on looking good and actually doing good. And this is while this has been something that we have been observing 2003 onwards, right now we do see that it's not just that we are stuck in the democratic transition, but because the institutions have not matured, we are now experiencing the elements of authoritarianism. I would just finish with this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Len. Just to let me say a few words in Greek, and then we come back with our conversation. But thank you very much. Ουσιαστικά, κατά τη γνώμη μου, η τελευταία ματιά, διεισδυτική ματιά της Ελένη στην εξέλιξη γύρω από την ανάπτυξη πολιτικών, εκπαιδευτικών πολιτικών, έχει πολύ ενδιαφέρον. Ουσιαστικά μας είπε ότι μέσα σε αυτό το πλαίσιο, ειδικοί γύρω από τα ζητήματα εκπαιδευτικής πολιτικής και εξειδικευμένοι γύρω από τα ζητήματα εκπαιδευτικής πολιτικής στην ανώτατη εκπαίδευση, αποσύρονται εδώ και αρκετό καιρό από τους δομές και τους οργανισμούς. Έτσι το κατάλαβα εγώ, το κουβεντιάζουμε όμως, και είτε απορροφώνται στα πανεπιστήμια, είτε αποσύρονται, και άρα όλο και πιο μη ειδικοί αναλαμβάνουν θέσεις κλειδιά για την ανάπτυξη εκπαιδευτικής πολιτικής και μεταρρυθμίσεων γύρω από τα πανεπιστήμια. Τα χαρακτηριστικά παράδειγμα που μας είπε η Ελένη ήταν ουσιαστικά σε αυτό το σημερινό νέο, πραγματικά σημερινό, γύρω από μια μεγάλη μεταρρύθμιση που θα ξεκινήσει από μια επιτροπή για τα πανεπιστήμια. Αυτή τη στιγμή ο Υπουργός Παιδείας που συμμετέχει είναι πρώην εισαγγελέας και ο βασικός σύμβουλος σε αυτή την επιτροπή είναι ένας πρώην Υπουργός Άμυνας. Και όσοι ασχολούνται στους διάφορους οργανισμούς, κυρίως είναι από τη νομική δικηγόροι, που όμως δεν έχουν εξειδικευτεί σε εκπαιδευτικές πολιτικές. So, Elena just said some things about the last reform, the today news, about an excessive try of reform of the higher education system in Georgia, and the absence of expertise on policy, on education policy, and especially on education policy and higher education. Now I will give the floor to the audience, and I'm sure that we are going to have an interesting conversation. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So what about some questions? I'm going to say Mrs. Fagrida, Vasiliki.
Ευχαριστώ. Thank you for your presentations. If I'm not mistaken, you've said that when the reform started, they were funded by the US.
Yes.
Is that right?
Heavily.
Heavily. On all universities or just Ilia?
It was the system level funding. World Bank provided, USAID provided lots of funding, as well as the EU. EU has provided structural funds ever since. So the idea was that because the country wants to move towards the West, then the concept-wise and the paradigm-wise, it was going to be Bologna process, and the funding was going to be joint.
So it was an effort to pull you from Russia's arms?
Yes.
Okay, and another question, if I may. How you managed to elect your rector? You were the only university to do that. Is it not so?
That's right. The university has a very interesting history in itself. The university started to function, it's a very young university. It was put together during the consolidation reforms by 2006. And so it didn't exist before 2006. And one of the first, and the main pool of the academic personnel were those reformers that actually left the ministry. So the ideas of how to democratize the system stayed with them. So therefore, we managed to maintain this. And up until now, actually, because the university was not, probably because the university was not very vocal about the political processes, we stayed under the radar, although we were looked at with a suspicion. But right now we became under the attack.
Thank you very much.
I hope I answered your question. Sure. I think there are more questions.
Το μικρόφωνο σας, κύριε Καβασακάλη.
Sorry, yes, I forgot my microphone. Mr. Agapiadis, you may continue the conversation.
So, thank you for your presentation today. I have to say that I was unpleasantly surprised by what I heard today, and it saddens me because it seems from your presentation that you started very strong as a country after leaving the Soviet Union, and you had very many hopes and ideals. And unfortunately, in the last few years, there's been a degradation of those things as it concerns at least higher education that we were talking about today. I should not venture into other areas. I have plenty of questions, but I'll try to focus on one at this point and see how the process goes with questions from other students. Is the influence that is attempted by outside university factors, such as the ministry or political parties, is it attempted also in the curriculum, or is it just in the structure of governance of your institutions? Thank you.
Thank you. And this is, I guess, this is an important question because we do know that in Russia, it has penetrated the curriculum. We know that this is the case in Russia. We do know that the tendency of doing so is there in Hungary as well. And maybe it will be present in Slovakia as well. It has not penetrated curriculum in Georgia. It has not been there. So, and there is an interesting kind of backstory to it. The university autonomy primarily is understood as the academic freedom in Georgia. And this is because of the censorship during the Soviet Union. So pretty much university autonomy somehow is equal to academic freedom. So first of all, what has been safeguarded, even during the post-Soviet times and neglect, and afterwards was this. So even within the fields, the disciplines, we are not even, so the idea of cross-checking even the curriculum is not there. So it has not penetrated, it's paramount, and there is a huge reaction on it if it's there. However, with today's announcement of the Prime Minister, this is something that we started to discuss in the higher education community, that maybe this will be, so the Prime Minister said that this is going to be the 4-year very intensive process, after which we will go back to the orbit of the real values. So depending on how, and these are all assumptions right now, depending on how capable the reformers group is, and depending on how much resources this will need, because it's a small country and we don't have much of the resources, it might just be a statement and whoever will be scared, they will get scared, but it might not. It depends how long they will endure the current political regime, basically.
Very interesting question, and more interesting the answers. Do we have any other question, please? Yes, Professor Stamelos.
Microphone.
Thank you very much for this exciting presentation. In fact, I have a lot of questions, but I will try to stay more limited. I want to know more about higher education climate. I want to know something about, I mean that, is there any relation between the policy of autonomy and the increasing of corruption? Is a problem internal the higher education institutions, or it's something more general about the political system and the relations with the higher education institutions? Also, I would like to hear some more about the small private universities, which were numerous, and I want to understand something about the sustainability of these institutions. For example, what happened if such institution closed? What about the students? And a more general question about, indeed, is there a problem, a problem about higher education, or is more it's a more general problem about the place of Georgia in a geopolitical game?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll start with the last one and move upwards. My understanding and conviction, so to speak, is that higher education can stay away from the volatility of the geopolitical games. The amount of pressure that is made on the higher education institutions over the course of the years is unnecessary, even within the geopolitical game. This is usually, maybe not usually, but I would explain this with again, and maybe I have this theoretical bias already with the institutional fragility. What I have observed over the course of the years, how policymakers are making the decisions, they are very much affected by this state of volatility. So everything, and they keep saying that they are like, they feel like they are firefighters. So everything can explode every day. If we follow this line of logic, then it means that they are operating in the constant fear that something might go wrong. And then this breeds very much this conspiracy understanding that some things might go wrong. Therefore, this really high sensitivity towards who will be a decision makers at the universities. Otherwise, there is no need. Therefore, I think this is more of a cycle of poor understanding and the high fear of non-institutionalized situation, which is very much linked only to how strong the sole decision maker is. So again, this is layered. Of course, there are lots of layers, and I wouldn't go into too much detail into it, but this is layered with the idea of everybody else at the university or at the ministry level, apart from top management, to be prone to delegate up. They are not ready to stay accountable to the decisions that they make. A very short example from my work. I had to even cross-check the spelling before signing because nobody else would, because they knew that the final person who would sign the decree or the regulation or even the contract of a regular employee would be me. So they didn't even care. So they would delegate the responsibility up because it didn't stop at them and they were not the ones who were signing off of it. So this would be me more saying that it is very much unnecessary. And if it was linked to the geopolitical ones, then more of a vicious or more villainous political figure would strategically pick and choose, and not just go across the board. So I would just stop there. Private universities and the sustainability. Private universities, there is a recent study, I think 2024 or 2023, Galt and Taggart on biannually or every 4 years does this study of what is the possible gain in higher education as business in Georgia. And for the past few years, the niche that the private universities, institutions have found is international students. So since the quality assurance system has internationalized, it has become easy to lure the international students to Georgia. And they are, of course, the out-of-state tuition fees are much higher. And this is what they are basing their business model on. So as Galt and Taggart says, higher education as business is very profitable in Georgia. And this is something that Ministry of Education likes very much. Again, very unidimensional understanding of what education is, higher education is about. About sustainability. Quality assurance system has this built-in safety net already that when the universities cease to exist, or if the programs are no longer accredited, then the student mobility happens into other universities. There is one safety net, or the universities would continue functioning until these particular students would graduate. We didn't have this up until 2015 or something. So there was drama always. I participated in all of this. So the system has gradually become more flexible. At the beginning, it was one size fits all and very dramatic decisions. At the beginning, we even had only accreditation and non-accreditation, nothing in between. So all this diversification of the system came about later on. Policy autonomy and corruption and political system and higher education institutions. So autonomy that we are talking about, I was talking about right now, is much more focused on how much universities maintain their own agency within the volatile political situation, or even in general, what is their proximity to the power or not. So it is very much visible on how the autonomy is compromised vis-a-vis those who are in power. However, the idea of autonomy being compromised and breeding the corruption. In 2004, we started with this huge, one of the hallmarks of our government, post-revolutionary government, was anti-corruption. Everything had the flavor of anti-corruption. accreditation was done because of anti-corruption. National exams, entrance exams to university were put forward because of anti-corruption, so that the university's professors would not be taking money for it. Right now, we have clientelistic system rather than corruption per se as giving and taking money, but this is very chronic and clientelistic system. I hope I covered the questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Len. Do you have any other question?
Θα μπορούσα να ρωτήσω εγώ. Μαραγκού
Ναι.
Χριστίνα, επειδή έκανα αναβάθμιση, δεν μπορώ να προσανατολιστώ να βρω το χεράκι. Hello everyone. My name is Christina Maragou. Thank you for your presentation, Helen. Well, I heard your presentation and the main emotion I had, it was sadness, because I tried to put myself into the position of the students there. And I saw that you are very emotional involved in all this.
Very much so.
So I see a very pessimistic political situation there. And I wonder why you do not lose your hope about this area, the academic area, and you continue to focus on universities. What is this that keeps you engaged in this field? And I would like to ask about the new generation of students. I imagine if here this happened, students will protest and they will want something more about their education and their future. How students react there? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, the situation is very tense here, and we have reached the boiling point, which is why it translates into the emotional kind of responses to whatever we do. And I'll tell you, what was my more of an emotional journey to the point that I am now. In April, the government passed the foreign agent law, which meant that everyone who is funded more than 20% comes from the international funds, then they have to be registered. And knowing that this is something that has been instituted in Hungary, in Russia, we knew that this is not only the transparency issue, it's something else. It's more about chasing after those who are not pro-government, right? Just to put it very mildly. So when that happened, and this was the second time that it happened, because in March 2023, there was a first attempt for the government to do so. And we took the streets and there were huge protests then. And then they backed off. And we thought that the civil society was strong enough to show the state that this wouldn't fly here. But I guess they outsmarted us. So when in April the same happened in this year, 1 year down the line, my reaction was that they outsmarted us and we were too late to react. Because we were so much in the euphoria that finally we have gone through the fire and gone through the other side already, that by limping, not perfectly, but we would still go to the other side of democratic society, and we were already almost there. And reversing it was not that difficult. And in April, I was proved wrong. Some of my colleagues have had then and still have a different reaction to it. And they say that this is the time when we get into the longer term resistance with them, with the authority, with the power. And I'm thinking that this is too late because the civil society became very comfortable in their own seats for over the course of last 12 years since the government changed. And we thought that when we changed the government, everything was going to be fine, not great, but fine. And we're just learning by doing. So by now, what I have seen is that it's very easy to corrode the system that is very fragile. So over the course of this last 12 years, what we thought that we were building has been demolished within a year, not even since April. In October, we had the elections, which were rigged, and since then, we are out on the streets. Most of the protesters are students. The student body is out there. The student body who understands what it means to live in a liberal society, they are there. But it is 1/3 of the society. And right now, the question is whether 1/3 of the society is enough. Because my understanding is that these type of battles are being fought and won by resilience rather than resistance. Georgian culture is resistant, but not resilient. We are all about fighting to the death. But this is just, it can happen in like one moment, okay? And if you look at in our history, this is the history of life and death and always about the battle. But the resilience is not the concept that we're familiar with. And I am in this, I would love to learn about it. And this is something that I've been talking about with my colleagues since April, that we need to learn and we need to teach students about resilience. Because resilience is not there. And if the society is not resilient, then they're in this situation, then they're doomed to lose, at least in a short term. Resilient societies know how to overcome this in a long run. We do not see the long run. It's every day we are going to the protests, but it starts and it ends on the same day. And then the next day we start over. So it's an understanding of the life in a different manner. In a bit more broader sense, what students protest about is always when it becomes so dramatic. I have not seen the students protesting about the quality of education. They would not come to the university and say, we are not happy with this and that. No, there is no understanding of that here. The urgency of education being so important or their right of being content or discontent is not there. So I haven't seen students being very proactive about voicing their discontent about these small things. And again, I don't know, it might be just cultural or it's about the numbness about what education is about, because it doesn't play too much of an important role for them in life. So then they just don't pay attention to it, rather. But when it becomes life and death, then they are there. And yes, they are there, and we have had so many. We have about over 100 arrests since November. And they are the students of 18, 19, 20, and over. But again, so this is more about this heroic thing, right? That they are there because it is the last days for the battle. Why do I stay in academia? Why do I maintain this? My understanding, or my more of a constitution, is that in the modern times, especially, the society prevails, or society develops if the education system is strong. So this is my conviction, and that's why I stay here. Therefore, this is more of, yes, I am also out on the streets, but I cannot compromise this part of it, because this also means that I have not done a part of my job, which is part of this resilience talk that I have just talked about. Sorry for this long philosophical answer, but yeah, it's triggered something. Your question triggered something in me. Thank you.
Mr. Agapiadis.
Actually, your answer, I'm not looking at it from a philosophical point of view. I'm actually saddened by your answer because it's something that we wish does not happen anywhere in the world. My question has to do with if you have received any type of support from the international higher education community. And I'm not just talking about, oh, well, we understand, we're here for you and all that. Any actual communiques, I don't know how to describe it, any publications, any articles that are written about the state of higher education at this point and the danger that it's going through in your country. And secondly, do you foresee that with today's other big event, which is the inauguration of a new president on the other side of the world, things will get better or worse? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There has not been too much of the interest from the education or higher education community, international higher education community, apart from what you have just mentioned, right? So there has been few of the open letters that has been also from our colleagues who have worked with my colleagues, for instance, and then they said that we are going to issue support letters, and those have been there. But my criticism towards these things, not criticism though, I think my take on this is that regime that we are dealing with does not recognize these gestures. These are gestures for them, right? So this for me, there has always been this miscommunication. And this is kind of more of a also debate that we are having within the activism groups, whether how do you approach an offender who is not playing by the rules, and by democratic rules we are talking about now, or by the rules of the debate, or any other rules, like when we go to debate with the opponent, they are going to become personal. So do you become personal, or you just stay within the boundaries and you show that you are above it? And I don't have an answer, because what are you trying to achieve? It depends, right? If you're staying above it, then it doesn't concern him or her. That's the problem, right? But if you start to play the same game, then what happens to your principles? And when you are in this conundrum, then I think you already lost. That's the problem. Because in this battle, you should understand that you cannot come out of it without damaging your principles. I think that's the answer there. And when we are and this is where we are on the edge of whether it's about the values, these values that we are aspiring, or getting your hands dirty. So when we are talking about the response or the support from West, of course it is inadequate from this point of view, from the point of view that I've been developing now, because this is a very nice gesture for me, because I know that my colleagues do care, but it doesn't even hit the mark of attention, not even like of irritation to those who it has to reach. About the geopolitical projections or talks, it is very visible that the government now is very much awaiting for it. If the government awaits for it, then we also await for it, because then it might be an important change. Because somehow their actions is not only Russia-inspired. They still need the international support. We do have support from Orban, and this is what they're capitalizing on, for instance. If they're capitalizing on it, then of course, and this is an interesting times for the geopolitical debates as well, right? Theorizing upon it as well. Then, of course, they're seeking for the allies elsewhere. And America is one of them right now. So we'll see. If that falls through, then it might be that we still have a chance. Otherwise, it's a long battle that we are in. It's a long one. And I will finish with just this, because it's been hovering in my head for the past couple of years. My Czech colleague from Czechia, he mentioned, and he's the one who remembers the Soviet occupation of Czech Republic then, that when, and they have closed the borders, right? This is how it happened. So there was no way out. And everyone who opposed the regime, they were neutralized. So apparently what the society started to do, they started to wait out. It's not that they became conformist. They waited out and they started to harvest this protest. And when the time came, and it came 50 years down the line, then they were ready. So my understanding is that it might be, this is where we are now. That's why it's dramatic for me. And I'm sorry that I keep my lectures are never optimistic. I should have warned Adilas about it. My seminars are never optimistic. So sorry about that.
The situation is, I think that we have a discussion about a very interesting theme, and with a view of Elene for almost 2 hours. So if we do not have any other question, if you have any last question? Because at Georgia, at this time is 10 o'clock, I think, eh?
It's okay.
Okay.
This has been very, very satisfying, to be honest. So thank you so much.
It is very interesting for us, Elene, to believe me. And since I said Georgia, let me show you for a quick where Georgia is and where university is at Stiflorina. Is it? So we're actually neighbors here in the university. Just to have a quick look. And because we were discussing and about geological situation and changes there. And yes, Mr. Rapiadis, sorry, I was playing with Google Maps, sorry. Your microphone, please. Your microphone.
I don't want to question and I don't want to keep your colleague. It's just a comment. I had the luck of visiting your country in 2019, and I spent about 5 days there. It's a beautiful country, I have to admit. It's a wild country. It's a country of very many differences, and it has an amazing cuisine. And the people are very, very proud. I have to say that.
True.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank
All
you
of
very
you.
much, Mr. Agapiadis. So I think just one word, Erasmus, or two words, Erasmus International.
Absolutely.
Because, yes, so I think that we're going to the end of this seminar. Elene,
And I'm hoping to see you face to face through the
Yes,
Erasmus
yes,
mobility. Yes,
yes.
definitely. We're
we're
doing
going
that.
to do that, yes. Elene, I think that I'm just going to conclude this discussion saying something that I believe that all of us that we have heard that seminar, we think the same thing, the same. I want to thank you for the intriguing presentation that made us think about higher education policy implementation and how strong they are connected with the changes in the policies, governments, and the society in a European or universal context, and of course in the era of globalization. And thank you because your presentation, but most of all your answers, were specific and with emotion. And there were your point of view, and I think this is something that we do not see very commonly. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for this opportunity and really hope to see you very soon.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you very much.